Welcome, dear viewers, Prisma fans, and everybody who is watching right now to this holiday special episode of our What's New in Prisma live streams. My name is Nicholas Burke. I'm a developer advocate at Prisma, and I'm here with my colleague Alex, also developer advocate. Alex, how are you
Hello.
doing today?
I am doing okay. Pretty nervous, just a bit, in that I just had a few minutes to prepare everything for the live stream, but all's good.
All right. I think we're also having guests on the stream today, and I think some of them are also struggling with audio backstage right now. We'll figure all of this out. I'm sure that nobody will be too disappointed after this episode, anyways, because we have a ton of great stuff prepared that we're going to talk about. And it's a holiday special episode because we really have a special guest today. And who knows, I think last year, our holiday special episode, it took almost 2 hours. I don't quite think that we'll hit that mark today. But it's like certainly open-ended, and we have enough time to really chat in depth with the guests that we have on the stream today. And the first guest is actually our co-founder and CEO, Søren, who has never been on a What's New in Prisma episode. So I'm really excited to welcome him here. And together with him, we're going to do a little bit of a review of the last year, and of course, also give an outlook as to what we are excited about in 2022. All right, Alex. What do we usually do at the beginning of our What's New in Prisma streams? What's the first thing on the agenda?
We share our screens and go through the release notes.
Yes, that's usually the thing. So I'm going to do that today as well. I have prepared the screen right here. Let me rearrange the windows. Here's my screen. And indeed, we're talking. And this is the Prisma repo, by the way. We're approaching 20,000 stars. So if anyone who is watching right now hasn't started the repo yet, just go to the repo. I'll drop a link in the chat, and then please leave us your star so that we can approach the 20K mark. All right. The latest release, of course, can be found here on GitHub in the releases section. And I'm just going to walk over the release notes. We're getting close to the holidays and everybody's winding down. So this is a little bit of a smaller release this week. And we also adjusted actually our release cadence. The attentive Prisma community member will have noticed that usually there are only 2 weeks between Prisma releases, and we usually release on Tuesdays. But for this one, 3.7 has been released 3 weeks after 3.6. And if I'm not mistaken, then the next release actually is also scheduled only for in 3 weeks from today, so not the usual release cadence of 2 weeks. And that's just because around the holidays, a lot of people are out, things are a little bit slower. We also actually at Prisma, we had planned an offsite where the entire team was supposed to meet in Switzerland. That got canceled, unfortunately, at the last minute, just because of the COVID restrictions and the uncertainties around it. But yeah, here we are with version 3.0 that we have released. In 3.0, we have released referential action support for MongoDB. And like another term for referential actions is cascading deletes and cascading updates that you can configure in relational databases. And interestingly, we're now also adding those capabilities to MongoDB, where this is usually not natively supported, if I'm not mistaken. So Prisma can also expose features and workflows that database vendors don't natively offer, because we have another abstraction layers on top where we can implement that kind of very useful functionality. So now you get cascading deletes and cascading updates also with MongoDB, which is really exciting. Then there was an issue with referential cycles on MongoDB when you work with relations. So this has been resolved, and users are now prevented to run into these situations in the first place. Then another interesting note here in the release notes, another interesting section is the deprecation of the undocumented usage of the type keyword in the Prisma schema. And I'm curious, maybe people who are watching right now, you can drop in the comments whether you were aware that this keyword actually existed, or whether that's new to you, or whether you've maybe actually already used it. Because this has been something that we introduced in the very early, I think, alpha and beta versions of Prisma 2, actually. And it was supposed to become kind of a type alias thing. But we never really were happy with the feature, and after a very short time, we actually didn't document it anymore, so that it wasn't really considered part of the official developer surface that Prisma exposes. And now we need this type keyword for something else that I think we'll probably also briefly mention later in the episode, and that's composite types or embedded documents in MongoDB, because we want to use the type keyword to define kind of embedded types that you can embed on a model. So we're deprecating the old use of that type. And if people have been using this functionality, we want to know from you. And you can just go to the release notes and look into this GitHub issue and take part in the conversation with a comment. Right, and I see that we have an old friend in the comments. Ryan Chenke is apparently watching. So nice holiday greetings to you, Ryan. Great to see you here. And the last point on the release notes is Prisma Studio. Small improvements that are available in the new release. And yeah, that's it for the overview of the Prisma releases. One quick check on the backstage area with the sound. Did you figure out the sound situation? Oh, actually, yeah, it seems like this is figured out. That is really good to know. But one more quick thing, because before we pull up our friends from RedwoodJS that we are here to talk about today, I also wanted to briefly highlight a new page that we have put up on the Prisma website, prisma.io, and that is the showcase page. Showcase page gives a really nice overview of companies that have started to adopt Prisma and tells their stories. So on the blog, we also recently published a lot of these new customer stories, for example, with Elsevier. We even had an engineer of Elsevier here on the live stream just a few weeks ago and interviewed them about their usage of Prisma. And then a bunch of more stories that just explain how companies are adopting Prisma and how it makes them more productive when building their applications. So you can go ahead and check out the Prisma Showcase page on prisma.io/showcase. All right, I'll drop sharing my screen. I'll stop sharing my screen. And yeah, I think we are ready for our first guests. I'm really excited about it to speak to them in person for the first time, actually. And please welcome David and Anthony from RedwoodJS. Oh, and actually, I think it's only David right now. Anthony apparently also needs a minute. Here he comes, and here he is.
There we go. All right. Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you loud
and you can hear me, correct?
Yes.
The miracle of modern technology. So all around the world. It is a pleasure. Nicholas, I do feel like we're old friends. We've interneted a lot. Alex, pleasure to meet you. I think it's the first time we've interneted though.
Yeah.
Yeah. We do have a shared Slack channel with you all to stay in close touch whenever things are happening on your side or on our side. And I think for you, probably most exciting very recently has been the RedwoodJS 1.0 release candidate that you have put out. But maybe before we talk about that, and I know that you've also prepared a demo for that, can you maybe just briefly explain a little bit what RedwoodJS is, how it came about, what the motivation for it was? I think that would be useful context for everybody when going into the demo.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, so we have a plan, and we're excited. So with that, we'll just dive into it. Yeah, Anthony, sound good? I'll let Anthony introduce himself when he does. We'll splitting up the demo a little bit here. But we had a lot we wanted to tell you, so we actually got organized. But first off, I'm David Price, and I'm a part of the RedwoodJS founding team. There were 4 of us that founded Redwood, and now there's a core team, 19. I think we added. I think we're 20 now. We added someone yesterday. That's a part of the core team of maintainers and community leads for RedwoodJS. We have hundreds of people that contribute to the project and thousands that are part of the community at large. So Redwood is a lot of things, but if not for people. So I will tell you, our slogan is, well, actually, first off, have either of you, and I'm assuming not, so there's no pressure here, have either of you redwooded before? I know Anthony has, so this is for Alex and Nicholas. No is a great answer.
Start, Alex. You start, Alex.
No, I only spun up an application, but never touched it since. Yeah.
For my side, I actually went through the tutorial about, I think, half a year or 9 months ago. It was sometimes, I think, more in April, May is like when I really wanted to learn what it's about, and I sat down and went through the tutorial. And I also was extremely impressed, by the way, by the great style of the tutorial. It was super clearly written, very much attention to detail, and then also complemented, of course, with the tutorial videos by your friend Rob. And also, just in general, I have to say that you all are doing a fantastic job with the videos that you're putting out. Not only the tutorials, but also the trailers for like RedwoodJS that I regularly see on social media, which are like hilarious. Maybe you can drop the links to those in the comments later.
I will. Anthony, if you want to look up, I know the one, I'm going to show you one of those actually, but Anthony, the one that the infomercial that Rob did, that'd be a good link to drop. So, well, perfect. So here's my goal. My goal is that after we do this thing, you both are going to be like, oh, now I get it.
Nice.
And within 24 hours, you're going to spin up a Redwood app. Okay. So you let me know if we're effective in that. And well, actually it's not the weekend yet, but holidays, maybe this is your holiday project. Okay.
It
so
feels
Redwood,
like the weekend.
It feels like the weekend, right? Going into the holidays. We're about the same. So Redwood, the tagline is Redwood is the app framework for startups. And right now is typically when someone would go into a spiel about all kinds of technology and features that it has and what that means from a tech and component standpoint. But that's actually not Redwood. Redwood is people. When you talk about startups, you're talking about people building a thing together, often an individual starting something for the first time with some serious intent to create a product that's going to become a thing, and it will require a team, and there's people using the product, right? So RedwoodJS is people working on a project together. RedwoodJS is Tom Preston Warner, who at least 4 years, if not 5 years ago, over beers and pizza together, he and I, and mostly him, was talking about a framework he wanted to build that would capture the modern innovations we have for interactive web applications, interactive products, as well as the things that were happening in infrastructure on the Jamstack side, but across serverless and edge. So Tom Preston Warner, co-founder of GitHub, knows what it's like to build a massive monolithic stack on Ruby on Rails at that time, tried then to integrate with modern front-end technologies, knows what it's like to scale a team, knows what the process is like to optimize for CI and CD, to go from prototype to deployment, to testing, to full production deployment, knows what it's like to require long-term maintainability with your team and scale your users, right? So Tom's behind the project. People that are also behind this project are over the 24 startups that I know of that have built startups with Redwood so far. Some of those funded, and their stories are everything from a sole developer working in community with the Redwood community to get something started, working alone but with a team, and now having customers growing monthly, several startups that are funded, so multiple teams of people. And Redwood is a community of people that are building something together and really believe that by making each other be successful with Redwood, then that's what will make Redwood the project successful. So Redwood's about people. We're going to hear one of those stories too, because people in the community are able to level up their skills by contributing and joining. They've also leveled up their careers. So Redwood is all about people building startups or something like a startup together. So we're going to talk about Prisma. I'm going to show you what this means, right? Because all that's like, yeah, whatever. Sounds interesting, but Redwood is built for people. And if you were going to build, I'm going to show you this here, what this means. But if you were going to build an application today, Nicholas, what kinds of things, high level, what would you need it to do? Like, what kind of concerns would you have? Let's talk about clients. Like, are you going to have, what kind of client or clients are you going to have?
That's a really good question. And I think usually when we're talking about modern applications, then oftentimes you'll have a browser applications, but it's also not too uncommon, I think, that you also need a mobile application that somehow is being served the same data or at least similar data than the web application. So I think that we cannot really just count for a startup to only ever have a single client application, but likely there are going to be multiple ones. Maybe you also need a back office application where you need to edit data for a customer service team or something like this. So I think that might go in one direction for your question.
Yeah. So multiple clients is a big part of your answer right there. Probably not to start. You'll probably start with one, but you're probably going to have more than one. Okay, Alex, you're just getting started, right? And you need to deploy this thing, right? What kinds of deployment hosting needs might you have, like when you're just getting started? It's just you've got weekends, and you're getting going. What would you expect from being able to deploy a thing into the world?
Given that we've been spoiled in this day and age, so one-click deploy. So
okay,
yeah, that's one click. Preview deployments, of course, because we'd like to track how many times how the changes I've made and when I broke the app. What other needs? High availability, of course.
Yep.
And other need. I think those are my main deployment needs. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Now, yeah, and just obviously leading questions here, right? So you're going to want it to be really low cost to get started, preferably free, because you're prototyping. Now, what if? Now, so everything you're talking about sounds like serverless to me, serverless or edge, right? Depending on your infrastructure. Also, what happens if you need to switch over and now you actually need a persistent transitional server? Right? You're going to hope that you don't have to plan for all that ahead of time, but you can switch over without any code refactoring, worrying about the architecture down the road, right? So you want to optimize for maximum flexibility, lowest cost, highest iteration up front, so you can deploy as quickly and then change gears with as much efficiency as possible, right? So I'm totally putting words in your mouth, but wouldn't that be rad? Okay, so now let's talk about data, because we're here doing the Prisma thing. Now, you guys are nerdy about Prisma and you're nerdy about ORMs, but think about all of the data in your app. First off, I'm assuming your app is going to need to be dynamic. So yeah, there's data in it. What are your data concerns across your application, across your development process?
Okay, I can start, I think. So the first one, I think, comes down to just the way how the data is being stored. So how do I even model my application domain? What kind of database tables do I need? That I think is kind of the very first step. Then I want to know where to store the data, what kind of data store I'm using for it. For most applications, especially in the realm of building startups, I think it's still often the relational database that's being used. Then, of course, there are topics like authentication and authorization about the data. So I want to make sure that there is proper access control in place. People can know it's ensured by the system that only people with appropriate access rights can access the data that they can, or eligible to. Then just like that, the data like should be served in a pretty quick and efficient manner as well. For example, on the front end, I would want to avoid something like overfetching, having gigantic endpoints that return a whole lot of data, things like that. Maybe.
You hit a lot. Have you ever seen the Family Feud show? You know, and you've got to guess like the categories. You hit like the like really low percentage but high value ones. So you named several: authentication, security on the front end. Yeah, Alex, anything to add to that? I can think of a couple other things. So I got you. If nothing comes to mind,
I can think of I think consistency. I don't want it to be changing or unpredictable. And mostly because I'm getting started and I'm all alone, I would like simplicity in managing my data. So that's all for me.
Yeah, okay. 100% agree. So simplicity. Neither of you said I really want to do a whole lot of configuration to set things up front, right? Neither of you said I want to build out my test suite and really make sure that I've hardened, right, how my data is getting in the front and the back. We could talk a little bit more about what's happening with your data on the front end. We could talk about state. We want it to be interactive. So there's dynamic nature to that. And I think it's just implicit in what you both said that you want the data to be able to flow from the database to the user and back again, right? And you want to do that securely, dynamically. And and by the way, when I do this one-click deploy thing, thanks to Prisma, I just want everything that I was doing locally to like magically appear in the clouds. Right. Okay, so let's do that. You ready?
Yes.
I'm going to show you everything we just talked about, and it's going to take me, well, because my laptop is super slow, it'll take me a couple minutes, but that's all it's going to take me. I'm going to try and share my screen, and if this doesn't work, then it might take me a little while. All right, sharing the screen.
Sure we'll get there.
We've got the infinite loop for just a second. Can you see?
Yes.
Okay.
It is.
All right, so I've got a terminal up here. Is my font size okay?
Yeah.
Looks good to me. People will complain in the comments, I think. Okay, perfect. So I like that. Let me know if I need to boost it up. No trickery here. I promise there's no magic. All I did was run yarn create Redwood app, and I created a Prisma demo. It is a TypeScript project, so I set that value, and this is the output. So it installed the node modules for me. So I've got my node modules and packages ready to go, and that's it. Everything is from scratch. This is the latest version of Redwood. So we're on release candidate .4 for our version 1. We can talk more about that and what that means. It's really exciting. It's been over 2 years in development to get there. But that's all that I did. I did fire up our server. So there's an API and a website, and you can see that running right here. So this is what happens when I install and then immediately run yarn redwood dev command. So it fires up the dev local environment. So that's it. That's all I've done. Okay, so far so good. Over here in our project Explorer, this is our code base and what you get. I'm not going to spend much time here. I just want to point out that there is an API directory. We're using Yarn workspaces. So this is a mono repo. We separated the concerns of what we call Redwood sides. So there's an API inside of a DB folder. Here's this familiar guy. Have you seen that before, right? There is a website, right? So we have a web client here that comes with Redwood. Mm-hmm. And what would be nice, right, is if I could take all of this, and you Prisma people have seen this before, right? What if I could take this schema and then do all those things we talked about in the data lifecycle with, right? So we would notice I haven't done anything to set up Prisma yet. This comes baked into Redwood. Mm-hmm. So everything is out of the box. And it comes with this user example. Just so I can find this later, I'm going to change that model to user. Mm-hmm. And Redwood, influenced by Rails, works off of a concept of generators and getting you to boilerplate code really quickly. So everything we just talked about, we want to get this model into our database. So this is all the fun Prisma stuff that we already know about, and we're wrapping this with a Redwood command. Let me make that a little bit easier. I'll abbreviate it later. But yarn Redwood Prisma migrate dev. The reason we wrap Prisma migrate dev is because we want to pass along all the config and the working directory behind the scenes, so that people don't have to worry about that stuff, and they can just use Prisma out of the box. Right. So now we have our local migration, and I want to make sure that works. We've got the dev DB. I have table plus here. Okay. Right.
There's our SQLite instance.
There's nothing in the box, right? Nothing going on. All right. And then now I want to do all those other data things we talked about. And I'm going to run a command called yarn redwood generate scaffold user. By scaffold, I'm going to generate all the code, both on the API side, so the back end, and on the front end, so in our web client, that will allow us to have full CRUD for that model. All the files are generated.
And the name user that you provided in that command has to map to an existing Prisma model already?
Exactly. So what I did was I took that Prisma model, I created the migration using the Prisma command, and then I did everything else using the Redwood command.
Nice.
Now, if I go over to my Redwood page, check this out. I've got a list of new pages by path. Let's create a new user. All right, email. Is this right? Nicholas@Prisma. I don't need one password here.
.io. And it's with a K, but almost there.
All right. Oh, it's with a K?
I don't hold that against anyone if they mistype my name.
It's that whole thing around the world, right? Okay. Nicholas, save. User created. I can show that user. I can edit that user.
Amazing.
Nicholas Prime. And then just to prove that I'm really not cheating, if I go into Table Plus and then I refresh, there you are. Now we're not done. I want to show you everything that happened behind the scenes, right? We have code here, right? On the API side. We have our migrations, not our migrations, our queries. All of the Prisma queries are turning into what we call a service. And this is all of our business logic. And this code was written for us. This uses the Prisma client. GraphQL, we can talk about this, but we have an SDL file. We don't need resolvers because Redwood handles that, but we got this all out of the box, already generated. This is everything that's happening in the back end to manage our data. I want to show you another command, yarn redwood generate cell. And the cell, I'll just call it example. And what's happening on the front end, so this is a React component on the front end. And inside of these React components, I call it example cell.tsx. Check this out. This is what's handling all of our data on the front end. We have our data fetching right here. We've got our query, boom, built into a cell. We have states. I have a loading state. I have an empty state. I have a failure state. But what else do you need if you're working on a real team with real people? What if you had storybook files? I could fire up a storybook server right here, and I could start designing storybook, and I could mock storybook data using storybook. Also, I have testing. We have a full back end to front end test suite. And every time you run the generators, you get the boilerplate code as well. So that's what I mean when I say that Redwood is built for people. It is built with a process and a developer experience in mind that is literally end to end.
Very, very nice. I have one more quick question about the GraphQL API that's generated.
Yes.
So you showed the schema, and there was a user and a user's query, and I expect that there also were mutations. I don't know if we've seen them.
Yes.
And the resolvers for those you said are also auto-generated. So they exist also somewhere in the project, or is that like somehow magical, or I guess like have to exist probably somewhere.
Yeah, so at dev time, Redwood is building things behind the scene. So there's a build process. It's what's used to build our API, and that's where we're making a merge schema, and that's where we take your SDL files, your service files, and we generate everything else that GraphQL needs.
Okay, so the resolvers, they are not right now as code in the project. I couldn't go and see what the resolver, the user's resolver actually looks like.
Right, exactly.
Okay, good to know.
And there's some other special things going on, and I don't want to get too much into features yet. This is where I have a video to show you what the features are. But there's a lot of other things that, so let me just say it this way. There's a lot of things happening with GraphQL, but yes, we use GraphQL, but you haven't really used GraphQL until you use Redwood's GraphQL, because there's a lot of painful things about GraphQL that we just took those away for you. And it's secure by default out of the bat. Here's a directive. This directive is securing my queries and my mutations with authentication that I could run in one command. And then I can also do transformations on those queries and mutations as well, right there with those directives. React, yeah, whatever. There's a lot of things we don't love about React. So we took away the hard parts of React and integrating that in. That's because, again, Redwood is people. And so we're building this thing for people. All right, if you'll bear with me, I have one more thing that I wanted to show. And this is, if this is going to work, this is all the features that Redwood comes with, because now I will talk about features, but I'm going to let Tom do it in 2 minutes or less. Sound good?
Yes.
All good.
Go ahead.
All right, here we go. And just
hey,
tell me if you can't hear.
Dubs here to give you an update on RedwoodJS in under 2 minutes. Go! Redwood is a full-stack JavaScript TypeScript framework that deeply integrates React, GraphQL, Prisma, Storybook, Jest, logging, accessibility, authentication, deployment, webhooks, console, and more. Or as we like to say, if you're building a startup, build with Redwood. We got you covered. Since last year's Jamstack Conf, we've finished full TypeScript and autocomplete support. TypeScript components? Yes. Typed GraphQL on the front end? Oh yeah. Type data fetching? You betcha! Speaking of GraphQL, we have super easy custom directives for secure by default resolvers and more. Here's how you put a query behind authentication. And here's how that's implemented. We've also added configurable GraphQL logging, so you know exactly what's going on. But that's not all. We've also added logging to everything. But with Pinot, you can easily send your logs to external data loggers like Datalog, even on serverless. Want to pre-render some of your marketing pages for speed and SEO? Now you can with a single word. Just add pre-render to a route, and it'll be rendered at build time, delivered as HTML, and hydrated client-side. You love that SEO, right? How about built-in helmet integration so you can get that sweet Google juice? Am I right? Waka, 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 waka. Want to muck with your database on the command line? Type yarn Redwood console and muck away. We added one-line setup and integration for auth via nhost, Ethereum, and Azure Active Directory, bringing our number of auth providers to 10, or use dbauth to easily host your own authentication. Did someone say accessibility? Redwood's router will now automatically announce new pages on navigation and help you with skip links and focus management. Real artist ship, right? Well, now you can deploy your Redwood app to both server-full providers like Render and AWS, or serverless hosts like Netlify and Vercel, without any code changes between the two targets. Yikes, there's too much. Speed round. Easily mock the data fetching in your tests with test scenarios. Swappable GraphQL client library. Customizable generators. Translated the tutorial to Spanish and French. Ooh la la. Speed improvements thanks to ES Build and fast refresh. Holy cannoli, let's wrap it up. If you're building a startup and want to skip the BS and get to work, choose Redwood. We focus on developer experience, maintainability, and design-first workflows so you can build something your users want. Dubs out!
Tom is hilarious.
That was our best attempt to do all the features in Redwood. So okay,
with memes,
with
features
memes.
with memes. You can't just have the features; you need the memes too.
Which is also why I just can't start with the features, because there's too many of them. But yeah, and last thing, and then hand some stuff off to Anthony. We can talk about other questions. Early days, right? Prisma 1 days. We were looking for something that would let us do Jamstack-like deployments, but could kind of do that active record in the Rails world type feel, and just nothing existed. Nexus was tried. I wasn't doing the experimentation at this time. It was Tom and Peter Pistorius. And I'm not sure if it was, I'm not sure who showed the original kind of preview of V2 to Tom and to Peter, but that locked it in. And we were using version 2 when it was, .1 beta, and like every time we released, we were breaking stuff and trying to keep up with it. But it's been, Prisma was really the inciting incident to unlock a lot of this JavaScript full stack deployment workflow. we couldn't have done it without it. And it's the reason why I believe so many full stack JavaScript frameworks were popping up at the time. Prisma unlocks so much of that. So it's really been, I can't say this enough, invaluable to unlock all these other things we were able to do. And it's just been a pleasure to work with you all on the team. We're having a lot of fun, and hopefully you feel the same way about us, but don't hurt my feelings now. Do that in Slack later.
I think we definitely do. And it's actually funny you mentioned that initial meeting with Tom and Peter, because I was also in the room when that meeting happened. And I think back then they were both
where it happened.
actually in Berlin, where Peter also, where Tom also worked on his startup. I don't even know if he's still involved with that. I think it was called Chatterbug.
Chatterbug.
Chatterbug, exactly.
Chatterbug was where they tried to do Rails and React, and they were like, "Oh, this hurts."
Yeah, so like that's how it came about initially, right? Because he needed this basically for his own startup. Peter was working at Chatterbug, and then I guess at some point Redwood turned into a full-time endeavor also for both of them.
Yes, it has. And Tom is, another thing is we're not a traditional venture-backed or company-sponsored project, but Tom is sponsoring this project, and we're going to be around for a lot of years. So very thanks to him. And yeah, absolutely. So it's a passion project, and everything you said, it's motivated by people concerns, right? Like the way you feel when you're using something, you want it to be exciting, and you want to get down to building the features and shipping products. So, yep, that's it. That's really fun, Nicholas. I didn't know that. So you've seen a few things.
Yeah. One question actually that I had, because I'm not sure what actually the TypeScript story of Redwood is, and I think that initially it wasn't too much of a focus, but then in the video that you just showed with Tom, he mentioned a few like TypeScript features that are certainly now available. So type GraphQL like queries on the front end is like super useful, I think. Like how do you think about the TypeScript integration in Redwood in general?
Yeah, so I've been talking a lot. Anthony, I could keep going, but if you want to tell the TypeScript story, please jump in here.
No, I don't want to tell the TypeScript story. I barely do TypeScript at all.
The story, yes, because this project started a while ago. We announced in 2020, March of 2020, but it had been going a year before that. So it was JavaScript first at that time. And as of now, really, it's as simple as this. Redwood has full type support. So across front and to back, you don't have to have a TypeScript project like I did. As you saw, I was running a TypeScript project at installation. You could add that later. You could run hybrid. I typically just start with JavaScript for demos because it's easier to read. But even if I use JavaScript as my language target, I get fully type support. So that's ready to go and very helpful, right? Because that whole thing about types. I love consuming types. Anthony might share my sentiment. I don't like authoring types. That stuff just doesn't stick in my brain very well, but that's a story for another time. You should definitely use TypeScript in Redwood because it's easier.
Fair enough. All right. Should we jump in the demo that you all have prepared?
So yeah, well, I was gonna I think David wanted me to kind of tell my like backstory also. And
yeah, sorry, of course.
Let's do that first. Who is this guy?
Yeah,
that's all good. Yeah.
So 2 years ago, I did not know Anthony.
Don't worry.
March of 2020, Anthony and I had never met.
Yeah, no, that's true. I first found out about Redwood through Tom's podcast Media Blitz. He did like about 5 or 6 podcasts in March, April, and May of 2020. And I was someone who I was just starting a boot camp, actually. So I've been trying to learn to code for about a year or two already up to that point before I finally broke down and like did a boot camp. So it wasn't like I like never coded before, but I was still like very, very junior and still kind of figuring out how all this stuff works. And just listening to Tom talk about Redwood, it was really fascinating because I was learning like a full stack web curriculum in my boot camp where you would essentially go from the front of the front end to the back of the front end to the front of the back end to the back of the back end. You kind of like work your way back, and the units would get shorter and shorter as you went. And so by the time you got to the back end, you would have like a week for databases and like maybe 2 weeks for Express. And this was after months and months and months of React. So listening to Tom explain Redwood, I was like, this seems like exactly the thing I would need to actually build these projects that they're asking us to build, which are like so really, really complicated, and having to figure out how to put together React and Express and Postgres, having just learned all of them. It's like it's huge task. It's like an explosion of complexity that makes it really, really hard for learners to put it all together in their heads, like conceptually. So Redwood just came at the right time, and I was like the right person for it. And so I started just like learning it and going through the tutorial, which is already talked about, and then eventually starting to write about it and blogging, and then going out and speaking about it and doing podcasting. And then the team noticing that I was doing that and seeing that I was essentially becoming a de facto developer advocate for the framework just on my own. And then they invited me onto the team. And then about a month or two after joining the core team, I was contacted by Anant, who's the CEO of StepZen, which is a GraphQL API company. And he offered me a job. So like based specifically on my work with Redwood, like I remember the first time he sent me a message, he was like, "Are you with Redwood or are you open to opportunities?" And I was like, "Well, could I do both?" He's like, "Sure."
What an amazing story.
What Anthony's saying is that Redwood literally changed his life. So, I mean, if that doesn't motivate you to go fire up a Redwood project after this, I don't know what we can do, you two.
It will not get better from here.
But yeah, no, it's been awesome. And just the team, they're so welcoming. They're so gracious. They're so helpful. And like David, especially, like really, I know, like put a lot of time and effort into making sure that I felt welcome and all of that. So it's been an incredible experience. And then by proxy, I've gotten to meet people through Prisma. Like I have lots of friends who work at Prisma now. It's really great. Like Austin is a good buddy of mine, and the whole team is really cool. It's been really fun. I've been following along with like the Mongo stuff, the Cloudflare stuff, and I've been like kind of like QAing stuff as it goes. And so it's been awesome. Like I love this community. I love all these people. I love hanging out with them. So yeah, that's probably about the whole story. So
fantastic.
Let me go ahead and
so Anthony's been working on all the new things. On all the old stuff. So that's why, we wanted to show kind of what the core integration looks like. And then there's all this fancy new stuff you already do.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of repos here. This is if anyone wanted to like build this totally from scratch. Most of this David already kind of went through. It will just spin you up like a basic Redwood app and then get your database set up. But one thing that I did do slightly differently is I have an actual Postgres database up here now on Railway. So Railway, Supabase, there's lots of different companies now that kind of do this for you and then just give you a connection string. And then just before the stream, I spun up another fresh one because I'm going to want to like tear this down and stuff just in case like keys get shown and whatnot. But this is a live Redwood project right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect this to the Prisma data platform. So this is now a way that you can get your whole thing kind of synced together in a really cool way, because you allow us to actually give the specific Git repo and then you specify the Prisma path. So this is the one kind of Redwoodism you just want to make sure you get is you give it the right path, which is going to be API/DB/schema.prisma. And then it figures that out and it syncs. And then I'm going to now hop off again to put my key in here because now I'm grabbing a connection string from Railway.
That's a pro live walkthrough move right there. I would have just blasted that connection string to the world, right?
I've done a lot of that in my time, and it's kind of nice to be able to keep the project around after you show people it.
Yeah, I'm also not too trustful of our audience. Who knows who's sneaking here? If Prisma team members are watching, they're always up for some fun.
Oh, they're the sneaky ones. Got it.
Okay, so now our project is up and going. We have a couple connection strings here, one for the data proxy and then one for our regular database. And now we've got a couple things here. We've got this data browser, which will fetch our data that's already inside of our database. And then we've also got this query console that lets you query for the data. And these look fairly similar to, your Redwood services, which is pretty nice. So once you kind of learn the Prisma syntax, you already are going to know how to work with this fairly easily. So you can just run a query right over there. And then you can see that query. And then the data browser itself includes CRUD capabilities. So if we want to add one, and you got to make sure to check this. If you don't check this and you click save, then it kind of just creates a blank one without a title. Yes. So we're going to do that and then save one change. And if everything went according to plan, that will see, sometimes it does that.
Yeah, it's like when you keep the focus, I think, inside of the same cell, then it doesn't take the title in the end. It was actually a bug in Prisma Studio, I think, that I reported already a couple of months ago.
Okay, cool.
But, it's still an early access.
Thanks for the tip, yeah. All right. So it's all good, yeah. That was one thing I was trying to figure out beforehand, because sometimes it would work and sometimes it wasn't. So that's good to know. But anyway, now that we got in there, if we now flip back to our live project and refresh, there it is in there. All right. And so that is pretty sweet. So yeah, still as it says here, early access, so still working some stuff out, but like the base functionality here is like really, really cool. And I'm a big fan of this whole thing you guys have gotten set up. So yeah.
Very nice. Did you also enable the data proxy already on a Redwood project? Have you tried this or?
Yeah, so I tried it with and I was able to get it to work on the API just locally. There's a couple of things that are kind of weird with deployment because we've put so much magic into our deploy steps. Some of them run migrate by default, so we have to kind of figure out how to take that back out of some of these deployment steps. But it's pretty much good to go in terms of like the actual connection string and connecting and getting it to work. So there's a couple of things we still got to iron out there. But yeah, the data proxy is also really cool. And that's what I was using when I tried out like the Cloudflare thing.
I see.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Some food for our shared Slack channel probably in the future to remove these friction points.
Yeah, well, definitely. It'll be interesting. I didn't show you deploy, but Redwood, because it has a Jamstack like deploy, you may be deploying to Jamstack provider, Netlify, Vercel, or somewhere else. There's a build step. So we have a command for that, right? Because that's our sub tagline, right? The app framework for startups. We have a command for that. So Redwood deploy. If you set up your deploy provider with Redwood setup, deploy Netlify, Redwood deploy would actually be one command that would then take into consideration, you need to build, you need to run your database migration. So it runs through all of the Prisma steps to deploy to production. And then you need to run your data migration, and it will run all those three steps. So those can be broken down. We could separate them. It's just, if you don't actually know what's going on under the hood, if you're learning Redwood, then you forget to do that. But we could add other options there too. So for example, for Mongo, people would need to push, like do the old Prisma DB push at deploy time. Right. So there's ways we would just need to adjust those commands or help people understand what's breaking down too. But the pieces are all there. We're really excited about what you all are doing, and especially how it will enable people. So the dream originally was serverless. Serverless has let us down a little bit. There's a few things we're still lacking, but the database side has really been behind where we thought it would be. But you guys are, I think you have your eyes on that ball. And what'll be exciting, I think, and Anthony's played with it more, but what I'm seeing is people will be able to very quickly take their project and say, okay, I don't want to use, my RDS spun up DB anymore. I would like to run on, this serverless database, and they don't have to change anything. Maybe migrate their data, but they're using Prisma, they're using Redwood, G to G. That's what they say when things are good to go, I guess.
And I have a question. Is there any plans for like a code fast approach for the GraphQL API?
Yes, and say more.
Let's say, for example, support using Nexus or type GraphQL.
This is funny historically because Redwood started with Nexus and ended up migrating to SDL first. So I think that was what the team decided at the time. But if there's people who are interested in it, I'm sure it wouldn't be like, it would be possible to do. It would just take like someone to have to really want that and like help contribute probably.
Yeah, Alex. So there is some history there, and at the time, the tools weren't good enough to give us the flexibility we needed when we considered things from a long-term maintenance standpoint and really from a multi-client standpoint. So what we did instead was we started with generators that you could still take your model that could quickly generate your SDL files, your service files, and then we could be flexible from there. So we are looking at some things. There's Redwood projects that have custom are using TRPC on the API side as well, right? So that brings some of those benefits to it because Redwood's really modular, right? It's code, it's React, GraphQL, Prisma. You can pop in and pull out as you need to. So yeah, but that's and I'm the one. Tom and Peter could give you a lot more of the history on the Nexus side of things.
Right. I have also another question, and that's about the movements, I would say, in the front end or like front end / full stack framework space. And just a few days ago, I don't know if you've seen that, but BlitzJS, who I think was a competitor to Redwood, they kind of like put out a note that they're going to pivot a little bit, that they're not betting on kind of the actual framework approach where everything is bundled up inside one huge framework, but rather they want to build a toolkit that adds to the developer experience when you use Next.js. And their main like reasoning for the shift was growth, actually. So they shared their like growth in NPM downloads, I believe, over the past year compared it to Next.js. And it didn't really go up. And that was one of the main reasons that they didn't see a growth in adoption. Do you have anything to share maybe about the growth of the Redwood usage or the community? Like, what's your feeling? Is this like a project where you've seen some momentum, or like what does the situation look like there at the moment?
First off, everybody saw that. I like that you asked that. Like, right? That's
you heard about this thing that happened.
You're in the JavaScript space.
That thing? Oh yeah.
Right? If you do the JavaScript thing, odds are you're in the Next ecosystem, and these things are all very closely related. So yeah, in some good ways, that kicked up a lot of conversation on our end. And I'll just quickly make some observations. Anthony could do the same, and then I could speak to, evaluating if a project is doing well. I'd be happy to speak to that. But first, I just want to say we are close with all of these people. That's actually been a joy of being an open source, is that relationships.
Brandon's been on my podcast 3 times.
and that podcast got started coming on the full team in this idea of full stack Jamstack, right? And so we're close with all these people. Remix, Brandon at Blitz, nice. And enjoy working with them. Just as we get to work with teams, Prisma, Vercel, Netlify, the Guild has been a wonderful collaboration team. So that's what makes it fun. And there really is a spirit of we're in this together, which means that what is going to benefit the ecosystem the most, that solves the current problems that we have, right? Things are scattered, the overhead is really high, the ecosystem moves really damn fast, and that's what makes JavaScript brilliant and also a pain in the ass, right? So we're all trying to solve those things together, and it's a really fun time because things finally got good enough to be able to package it all together for this full stack app, right? When Next first came out, full stack for a server side, like a static site generator, like that would have been inconceivable 5-6 years ago when it first came out. Like, how would you do that? And now the pieces are in play. And you can even approach the front end differently. Redwood does not do the front end like Next does. We actually have a very different interactivity architecture, but that's for another time. So anyway, we're all paying attention. And I think from a high level, I didn't see growth as a concern. But it turns out we had to ship a hell of a lot of code to do what you just saw. And we put a lot of resources into it. We've had over 265, by my last count, contributors on this. We're 3 years in. Well, we were a year in when Brandon and his team started building on top of Next. Right? We were already a year in. And we were a year in when Remix said, hey, we could start doing this, right? So feature-wise, we've had to ship a lot of code to build out the full coverage end-to-end that we wanted to do for the DX we wanted. And it turns out that's really hard, especially when you fork a project and you're trying to keep up with that as well. So I think Brandon was absolutely right. The amount of time and resources it would take to innovate with new features while keeping up with Next was going to be really challenging. Anthony, any of your high level things that you saw, and then I'd love to speak to where Redwood's at and why we're excited about the future.
Yeah. I have another stream in 5 minutes, so I'm going to be like very, very brief here and then hop off. Thank you so much, everyone, for having us here. This is super great. I talked to Brandon at the time when he did the Next fork and was just like very curious how that was going to kind of work out. And he said in the message that the fork of Next was a big reason they slowed down on features and ended up having this kind of stalled growth, at least in his opinion. So I think it was the kind of thing where it was worth a try, but you kind of had to see how it would play out ultimately to see whether it was going to work or not. But I think that he is someone who listens to the community really well and takes feedback really well. And regardless of what kind of direction he takes things, is probably going to work out. And I think just the testament is how many people are already interested in Blitz and are very invested in it. And there's so much discussion around this RFC. So shows that people are already passionate about the stuff he's building. I think they will continue to be into the future. And I wish him the best in the endeavor. And flight control looks super cool. So, but yeah, I got to run. Bye, everyone.
Anthony, thank you.
Thanks, Anthony.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, and I've got a few. So, agreed on those things. And which also, I think there's a whole other question here that we're not going to dive into now. And Prisma's been in the middle of, which is how do you do open source and a company? How do you do business at the same time and in parallel? And it turns out it's really hard. If you even just start from the place of, hey, I want to do open source, but how do I support that endeavor? And there's the models for that. We're still trying to figure out what that looks like. And we have some questions about really making Redwood self-sustaining from a, like, how do we support a community of maintainers without turning Redwood itself into a business? We want it to stay open source. That's our intention for the long term. But how do you make that long-term maintainable? How do you do community in an organization that way? And the answer is not a DAO, by the way. So although there's some things we can learn there. As far as the quality of Redwood, so I'm a product guy. I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. And you never heard of anything I've done. I'm actually a normal entrepreneur. I've done a lot of different things. I've rolled up a lot of projects, and most people have never heard of them until Redwood. I hope a lot of people hear about Redwood. We really believe in it. How do you measure health? If you're a product guy, or if you're building a company, how do you answer the question, is it going well? And it's really hard to do. We don't have telemetry spun up yet. Like, we're not getting analytics. I can't tell you how many people are downloading Redwood. I see NPM results, and I don't know if you guys saw, like, 1 month we spiked and we like 10x what our NPM downloads were for the month. I was like, what? We're famous now. And then it came all the way crashing back down. We're like, somebody's CI got out of control.
Yeah,
right?
some CI server.
We have no idea. We have no idea, except for the kinds of things we are evaluating and measuring. And we talk about this a lot. What is the health of our community? Is it growing? What kind of people are we attracting to the community? Who is building startups with Redwood? If that's our goal, if we want to build an app framework for startups, right, the startups is like a big bucket term, right? People that want to build a dynamic application, and probably just a sole individual starting off, right? Is that happening? Are we finding those people? And currently about 1 startup a week is coming to me and letting me know what they're doing. And we have, like I said, many that are funded now, right? So they're not just building a thing for themselves. They're all in, and Redwood is a part of that. So we're looking at the people, the kinds of outcomes we hope to see, which is startups happening, the kinds of people that are building startups, like that Ryan Chankey guy. He kind of knows what he's doing. We watched in public, and that was me. He said, like, hey, here's my stack, and he had like 6 things. I'm like, and we'd met Ryan. I'm like, hey, Ryan, you mentioned a lot of things, and I know this framework that does all those things. And he's like, okay, I'll give it a serious look, right? And Ryan goes through a serious evaluation process, and he's using Redwood now, and he's a part of this. We call it a little.
He's using it for CourseLift, right? For his project.
Yeah. So Redwood is backing CourseLift. Next is a client, like it's a part of his full stack. He has Next, but the API. He's using the Redwood web client, right? So pretty fun. It's been fun to watch. But who are the people saying Redwood works for me, and then how is the progress over time? So those are the kind of things that we're watching. We're building stuff with Redwood ourselves. Our core team members are building Redwood startups that are funded. We've got some things we want to build, and the reality is it is taking a lot of code. We're 2 years over where we thought we would be right now. But the kinds of things we're trying to take the temperature of and measure, we're really excited about what we're seeing. And yeah, I kind of got off the train there, but the idea was simply, how do you measure if your project is headed directionally to hit a target that you want to hit? And for us, we're measuring at the level of people and community and the startups that are getting built with Redwood. And we have really high quality, and we're really excited about 22 coming up. So
super cool.
Yeah, I'll do my things coming up spiel. But questions about that? Was that at least a semi-satisfying answer?
Yeah, it was a good answer. And in fact, I could also relate to a couple of things that you mentioned, especially the one about building an open source project and not having any insight or idea who is using it and what they're building with it, right? I mean,
right.
Such a weird situation that I think is really also specific to open source projects, because in regular apps for normal users, you can just put in product analytics and have a real good overview about who and how people are using the app that you're building. And that also was a major challenge for us. We came up with this approach now for telemetry. We are looking into our community, trying to understand what people are part of that. We've recently introduced a really nice community tool that's called Orbit, which also really is a great help to gain more insights into that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, for the longest time, we've also been flying blind, basically, and just based on the interactions that we had every day on Slack with community members, we're like, okay, we're probably heading in a good direction, but until you get those numbers, it's always somewhat uncertain.
Yes, uncertain for sure. So yeah, I just echo those things. Orbit's a great tool. Orbit.love for people that want to check it out. Yeah. It's actually not, if you put your eyes on it, right? Like, are the people in our community thriving? Is the community growing? Right? Are people skilling up? What's the effect this whole thing is having on people? And we're trying to learn how to keep our eyes there as much as we are in the product, right? Like, we care a ton about all the same product things. We're trying to ship. We got CI/CD, right? Making it robust, security, right? We're doing all those things as well and features, but I think in terms of the things that motivate us right now, it's really what's happening at the people and the community level, which takes a lot of time. Don't get me wrong.
Amazing.
Okay, so things coming up, because I'm also supposed to go to a meeting.
Yeah.
Expect the final GA release of Redwood in the first half of 22. That's the official thing, but March is kind of a sentimental 2-year anniversary for us, so we'd like to do a 1.0.0 in March of 2022. We have some pretty exciting announcements, I think, that'll be happening around that time as well. We're really looking forward to seeing what the startups do with Redwood in 2022. And right now, what it means to be in a release candidate is we've got all the core features in. We're not going to break stuff. We're done breaking things, although we're really good at upgrade guides.
Not before 2.0, at least.
Before well, yeah. And, we expect major releases to come every few months, to be quite honest. We already have a roadmap that probably goes to V5 at this point, because
Wow.
there's a lot to do, and we're excited to do it all. And yeah, I'm trying to. So now's a great time. I think I just want to say, don't wait to start a Redwood project. We've got you if you want to get started now. And the best way to do that is the Redwood tutorial. So as you mentioned, so go to redwoodjs.com, check out the link to the tutorial, and there you go. And there's 2 parts to it. It takes you through all the fundamentals of Redwood, what the features are, but it builds in a really nice way. So it's a great learning journey. And if you've got a willingness to learn all these different components of the technology, no config required, but we handle that for you. You'll find the tutorials a wonderful learning experience. And that's all Rob Cameron. He wrote the tutorial. He's rewriting it right now. And the videos.
I'm a big fan of his work. The tutorials are just top notch. The videos are great. He is definitely an amazing educator.
Because you learn, right? You go through it and you actually feel like you level up. So look at the thing, like I can do stuff now and I understand what Redwood is. So that's what the tutorials for. And then jump into our community. We do a Maker's Hour. We host it on our Discord. And that's for people building things that just want to work in collaboration with others from the community. We do 2 of those a week. One's for kind of eastern half of the globe. One's for western half of the globe, time zone wise. So jump in and meet some people. But if you want to, after the tutorial, if you're ready to start noodling on a hobby or side project, join the Maker's Hour. And then additionally, we love contributors. And I'll be running another contributing workshop. I will show you. So one thing we optimize for is making it as frictionless as possible to contribute to Redwood. So we built local tools for you, and I'll run a workshop at least once a month. And the next one's in January. So you could follow me or find out about our forums for the contributing workshop. I believe it's January 16th, and it's free. I'll spend 2 hours with you showing you everything you need to know, from forking the Redwood repo to opening your first PR. And you can do it. You can do it. You can be a Redwood contributor as well. And you can help us get to V1, because I have a really long list, a triage list worth of priorities that we need help getting in, so we can get that 1.0.0 out.
Very cool.
So there you go.
Yeah, I think that was very motivational for people that are looking to get into open source, that maybe are still looking to find the right project for them to get started. So I think having this opportunity to even be walked through the repo, the workflows, is a huge help. So I think that's a great initiative also from your end, David.
Yeah, thank you. So I've now hijacked at least an hour of your time talking about Redwood.
And it was an amazing hour. So thank you so much for doing that. I personally learned a lot about Redwood that I didn't know before.
Very good. Well, good. So there's a chance. You let me know. I'll look for the Twitter feed that says you fired up a Redwood project here in the next 24 hours. Let me know if I was successful. And let me know what the Prisma experience like is within Redwood. And this is not an overstatement. Redwood would not be the same without Prisma. It really completes that life cycle for us of being able to start with the model of your data, and from local development to deployment, it's flexible. It works great in if you're aiming for high CI/CD velocity, it's a wonderful tool, and we've leveraged it heavily. So if you like Redwood, you definitely have Prisma is one of the teams to thank.
All right.
That's you guys.
Thanks, David.
Thank you all.
Yeah. So thank you for all the warm words. We now let you go so that you can attend your meeting and your coworkers are not too mad with us.
Yes, thank you. Oh, they like you guys, so it's an easy excuse. All right, take care.
All right,
Alex,
thanks for
pleasure
joining.
to meet you. Nicholas, until next time. Hey,
Cheers,
will you
David.
guys didn't come do this? I want you to Redwood meetup in the future. I need some Prisma demos, okay?
Happy to.
All right.
Just
That would be fantastic. Until then.
Bye-bye, David. Cheers.
Bye.
Ciao.
All right, Alex. That was a really nice interview. Did you learn anything new about Redwood?
Everything was new. So, and Ryan said, if you haven't Redwooded, you haven't lived. So it's time to live.
Yeah. In fact, I noticed that on Ryan Chenke's Twitter feed a couple of weeks ago, or actually just in the last few weeks and months, that he has been using Redwood for his new startup, and that's of course really interesting. And I'm also sure we'll have Ryan on probably in a future episode, maybe to interview him a little bit about his experience with Redwood. Maybe once he launches CourseLift and he has a little bit more time on his hands, he would be a very welcome guest again.
I agree.
All right. Yeah, Alex, one more thing on our holiday special agenda today, and that's the interview with our CEO and founder, Søren, who has never been on the podcast or on the stream. Initially, we also wanted to have some product managers join to talk about specifics of things that they're working on, but all of them actually weren't available. I think almost all of them already have a family, and I think in almost all cases this also was the reason why they're not able to attend, so they have a good excuse. But with that, let's bring Søren on the stage and talk a little bit about the last year and what we're up to next year. Søren.
Hey Niko, hey Alex. Wait, Alex,
welcome.
Are you Søren and I'm Alex? Oh, that's hey,
there's
good,
always
good to see
this awkward moment in the beginning when we bring someone on the stage to rearrange the name tags, but like sometimes it's like working really well if the responsibilities are clear. As today it's mostly Alex that's just doing it, but we also already had instances in the past where we ran in race conditions where the two of us were trying to arrange the images and the name tags at the same time, and that usually ends up being chaotic. But yeah, it's really nice to finally have you on the stream. I mean, we've been doing this for 1.5 years, and you are finally here to join us. And I think it's a really nice occasion because it's the end of the year. It's a good opportunity to reflect on a number of things that have happened. And yeah, I think we can use this time today to just talk a little bit about kind of the main highlights that we went through in 21, maybe from a company perspective. If you have any personal highlights, you can also go ahead and share those, of course, or also technology trends that maybe surprised you or excited you in the last year, but of course also the outlook for 2022. We are going to talk a little bit about this and what our priorities at Prisma are there. So yeah, let's maybe start a little bit with a review of the past year and share some personal highlights that we've gone through or that we've experienced. And maybe one of you wants to start by just like sharing like something about the past year that had got them excited, or otherwise, if you want me to start, I can also go first, whatever you prefer.
Well, I can throw a thing out there. A thing that has really happened this year is that we've started to talk about serverless relational databases, and that's really cool. I mean, you know, we've been looking for this for a while. At some point, we thought about building our own version of this, which would have been a bad idea. But luckily now, real database companies are building serverless relational databases. We have PlanetScale doing a serverless MySQL. We have Cockroach doing serverless Postgres. And Mongo is doing a serverless version of Mongo, which is really, really cool. So that means you can get a real production-grade database and pay nothing, and then just scale up as your project scales. So I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, it's like certainly a nice trend. And also, I mean, I remember like not only the topic about serverless like database providers like Cockroach and PlanetScale, but also just in general the topic of like serverless and accessing databases, traditional databases from serverless functions, which was always a huge pain point among our users, that we're now of course also addressing with new products that we're building in the commercial product suite. And yeah, I think on a product level, I've had a couple of highlights this year. And one of them, I mean, if we remember back actually 1 year from today where we were with Prisma, I think we were in a completely different stage where it was still actually the early days of the ORM itself. A year ago, there only was Prisma Client that was launched for production usage. Like Prisma Migrate was still running in preview. I remember actually in the last holiday special, we had Alberto, who back then was the product manager of the Migrate team, on the show to talk to him about the plans for the launch. And then we were able to launch the production-ready GA version of Prisma Migrate, I think in February, kind of making the ORM itself complete. And then we're able to shift our focus to also building out like commercial tools and the commercial platform that's going to sustain our open source development.
Yeah, we have come a long way. I think this year we have really kind of established Prisma, the ORM, as the default ORM in the TypeScript ecosystem, and that's pretty cool. A year ago, that was definitely not the case, and it was a question if we could even make it. But I think we have proven that having a company that can just spend so much time and energy building a quality product, it's really possible to go and build a new thing and have lots of people discover it, love it, and trust it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so rewarding to see the feedback from from the community every day. I mean, we get so much positive feedback, especially on Twitter. If people just search for the @Prisma mentions on Twitter, it's incredible the kind of positive feedback we're getting there every day. And I think that's also just a huge motivator for us to keep going. Yeah, like maybe Alex, you can also share if you want a personal highlight for you last year. And I mean, you're still like, or not super new to the team. You've been a year in, but you've only recently been hired full time, like kind of having been promoted from a working student to a full-time employee. So I'm sure that was one big highlight for you. Were there others?
From the product perspective and engineering, I think it's been really nice watching the engineering team constantly ship so many new features and improvements and on a regular cadence. Just that commitment, that's a big one, really. And we've seen so many features go GA and some of them get into preview, like at least we now have MongoDB support. However, it's in preview. We've shipped like the improved DBC. I remember it had a few issues, but right now it's in the clear. We shipped SQL Server for general availability, and we finally have a commercial product that's in preview. Yes, and given that I interned there for 3 months, it was also interesting watching the team build a commercial product. So yeah.
Right, you were looking behind the scenes a little bit, right, of how the data platform was being built by joining that team over the summer for 3 months as an engineer, basically, right?
Yes, I was in awe of the team, just watching them build out the core features, like hosting the data browser, for example, that I'm sure it took a lot of effort. And also the query console, that was also interesting mostly by Sid and also the rest of the developer productivity team. So yeah.
Right.
That's another thing to touch on, that we have really grown the team over the last year. I don't think most people using Prisma know this, but we are more than 50 people in the company now. We have a huge engineering team that is working on the ORM, of course, but also on this vision we have for the application data platform. So there's a lot of effort going into Prisma, and we have, of course, focused on building a team structure that can support this number of people and enable us to grow in the future. I think a year ago we were maybe 20 people, something like that.
Yeah, it was a huge growth last year in terms of employees, which is also funny in the way how it impacts kind of the working environment, that every couple of weeks you have meetings with different people that you've never seen before. And like for me especially, and for you probably as well, Søren, having been around for quite a while at the company, in the early days it always felt like you have a good understanding of what everybody is actually working on. And now with 50 people in the teams and teams organizing themselves, essentially, it's not possible anymore to keep track of this. And sometimes you just have to like figure out like, okay, who is now the engineer working on this or that, or the design team. So it's really nice to see that we are acquiring professional staff there.
Yes.
One more community related highlight that I wanted to bring up was the launch of the ambassador program that we had, and that was already really successful in the past half a year. So for everybody who's not aware, we are running an ambassador program where Prisma fans can apply, in particular Prisma fans that like to create content. And then they become part of our Prisma ambassador community. We have a private Slack channel for everybody with a direct communication path to our product and engineering teams. We also host these quarterly ambassador board meetings, also with product and engineering folks, so that you can share your feedback, you can ask questions directly to the people who are building the tools and who are responsible for the product decisions. So it's a great way to stay very closely in touch with us. And yeah, if you like to create content anyways, it's just also a good way to get rewarded with that, with swag, and also with educational workshops that we're hosting for ambassadors once a quarter. And another thing that also struck me this year was that we really see a lot of tools that are being built by community members for the Prisma ecosystem. And people who are following this show, they're already kind of aware of that, because every once in a while we feature the people behind these tools on the stream. But this is also something that I personally just find very exciting and also very validating for the work that we do, because it really means that it's something useful. We build a solid technical foundation that people are now extending to accommodate for their own custom workflows, right? So that's also really exciting to see.
I think this has been part of our strategy from the beginning, right? How we think about growing the Prisma community. It's really make sure that Prisma is a tool you can use in your workflow and build on top of. So we just had the team from Redwood, and they're a great example of this, right? They're building on top of Prisma. We have a number of big, really complex frameworks that embed Prisma. But we also have all of these other tools that extend Prisma in some ways, just are part of this ecosystem. And it's been really important for us to make that possible. I think we still have a lot of work to do to make it really easy. A lot of those tools, they rely on internal implementation details of Prisma, and those break, and it's really annoying. So at some point you have to don't talk about it, Niko. At some point you really have to standardize this, right, and create an SDK that these tools can rely on. But even without that, it has been really cool to see so many people build tools in the Prisma ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at the moment, it takes quite a bit of effort and also technical skill to actually do that, right? Because these implementation details are, exactly as you said, not exposed as an official SDK. So they don't have very well designed APIs. They might break any second. So it's really not something that people are supposed to do. But the fact that they are doing it nonetheless, I think really is, a big testament to how useful Prisma is for them as well. All right, when we think about the next year, 2022, it's coming up in only 1.5 weeks. What are the exciting things on the Prisma roadmap that you are personally most excited about, Søren? What do you think are the main focuses that we are going to put our energy into next year?
So we talked about how far we have come with the Prisma ORM, how much better it is today than a year ago. But there's still a long way to go. The nature of an ORM is that people want to do all kinds of things. So we have what we call this long tail of features that we need to implement. So a big focus for us is going to be take this list of features, rank them by importance, and then chip away at them. We have a bigger team now than ever. We can do more work than ever. We're going to continue to grow the team. So there are lots of relatively small features that are preventing some people from using Prisma or causing friction, making people second guess the decision to use Prisma. And all of those we are going to go and tackle. And that's what we have to do.
One example here maybe would be to support extensions like PostJS, where a lot of people are asking for this. And indeed, it has been called out numerous times as a blocker for people to adopt Prisma in their projects because they just rely on that functionality. And even though you can actually use it with Prisma today, so because you can send raw SQL queries with the Prisma client as well, it is possible. But if your app heavily relies on that, then Prisma might just not be the right fit, because the benefits that you get are not just worth that trade-off if another library actually already supports that use case, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You can always break out of Prisma and do all of those things. You're never trapped. But if a large percentage of the work you need to do with a database doesn't fit within Prisma supports, then at some point Prisma just becomes a liability. There's no need to add that to the mix. And we need to make sure that as much as possible fits within the scope of what Prisma can do for you when it comes to working with databases. And right now it's good enough for a lot of people, but not for everybody. And during next year, we're going to just continue to raise that bar. So more and more people can live entirely within the sphere of Prisma.
Okay, so one thing is catching up basically on the ORM front, building more features, things that people want in the open source version. That's one area that we're going to invest our engineering resources.
And then the other big one is that we're really just getting started on this thing we call the application data platform. We talked about it, I think, a month ago for the first time publicly in the Serverless Data Conference, which is a really cool conference with a bunch of talks from different companies. So definitely go and look at that if you haven't. But really the data platform is us learning from the largest tech companies and seeing what is the infrastructure, what is the tooling they have built internally to make their application developers productive. And then interpreting how can we bring this to all developers that are deploying to Netlify, FSL, or other environments. Developers not operating at the scale of Twitter or Facebook, but still with some of those same needs. So that's what the data platform is. It's going to be really, really easy to incrementally adopt a part of the feature set in the data platform when you're already using the Prisma ORM. So that's our main goal, make it really easy to use. And I think you talked about this a little bit in the talk with the Redwood team, that the data proxy is the first version of that. It solves this very particular issue with connection pooling when you deploy to a serverless environment. And if you're already using Prisma, then adopting the data proxy is as simple as changing a line of configuration. And over the next year, we're going to go and expand this. We'll build more cool things, the kind of things that when I was a developer, I wish I would have had access to, the kind of things that just aren't really there, but we had to build them internally. And lots and lots of developers in startups and larger companies, even on personal projects, they are kind of reinventing those things themselves. And now we're trying to build them out as a SaaS offering you can just plug into and rely on.
Yeah, and I might sound like a broken record to people who are watching this stream regularly, but like the roadmap that we have is shaped by the input and the feedback that we get from our community. So if there are things that you want to see in the Prisma data platform or in the Prisma ORM, then the best way to make everyone aware of that is to go to GitHub and create an issue with that feature request for the Prisma data platform. A good way to interact with the product managers behind it is through Intercom, which is directly integrated on the website of the Prisma data platform at cloud.prisma.io. And there also is a specific Slack channel for the data platform in our public Slack, where you can raise ideas, ask questions, that is closely monitored by our product managers responsible for the data platform. All right, that's a lot of Prisma stuff that's worthy to be excited about next year. I have one more thing that I wanted to, or like a few more things that I wanted to add to that as well. So on the Prisma product side, or Prisma ORM side, one feature that I've also already mentioned a few times in previous streams, but it still keeps me excited, is the implementation of composite types and embedded documents in the Prisma schema. So as I mentioned, also when going over the release notes in the beginning of this stream, we're deprecating the type keyword, which was in the past used as a type alias in the Prisma schema, because we need it for another use case now, and that's for these embedded types that you can just embed in your models that will be co-located to the actual like data records in the database instead of being referenced across tables, or in the case of MongoDB collections. And that's just a really useful feature, I think, not only for MongoDB. There, of course, it's especially needed because embedded documents are just a crucial feature when working with Mongo, but also for relational databases to get typed JSON data in your models as well, which is also going to drastically increase the developer experience for people that are making use of that feature.
JSON is so much nicer when it's typed.
100%. And yeah, then in the last stream, Alex and I, or actually it was Daniel and me in the last stream, we were talking about concrete upcoming features of the Prisma data platform. And we talked about the data projections and actually showed the video of that, the part of the keynote, Alex, where you introduced the idea of data projections. In the next stream in January, we'll take a look at another feature that's planned for the Prisma data platform, preview databases. So databases that are coupled to your preview deployments on Vercel or Netlify and automatically provision the right database in the right state for you, ideally already seeded with data. So we have a lot of ideas there as well. And another trend that I find interesting, that's more of a general technology trend, but also somewhat related to Prisma, is the merging of front-end and back-end development into single frameworks. So I think Redwood was an example of that, but then also actually more front-end frameworks that suddenly give you the ability to also do things on the back end. So Next.js is a good example here, that actually is a front-end framework, but all of a sudden they give you API routes that let you implement server-side functionality for your application, where you can communicate with a database. With get static props and get server-side props, you can make these calls at build time of your application or at request time. So again, server-side functionality that front-end developers now suddenly have access to in the native environment that they're working in every day already. So really, these frameworks, they're making the front-end developers, full-stack developers, all of a sudden. Remix is the same. In Remix, you also have the ability to do server-side calls. And I believe, Alex, like you're more an expert with Vue.js than I am. You wrote this article, I think, about Nuxt and Prisma. Nuxt also has a similar feature as the API routes in Next, right?
Yes, it does. Yeah, I'm not really an expert. I'm just good enough at Nuxt. Yeah.
Like certainly more of an expert than I am. That's for sure. Yeah, and I think we'll continue to see more in that entire area also with React Server components. So that trend of getting front end and back end closer together is really interesting, I think.
I think it's really interesting to see as the infrastructure gets more and more specialized and complex, then you have more of a need for these frameworks to span everything. When the Vercel and Netlify started to enable you to deploy backend code by just putting a JavaScript file in a folder, that was amazing, right? And I think you'll need the same level of integration to think about this new edge compute world. How do you deploy code to the CDN nodes in a way that makes sense, where you can reason about the data? You really need frameworks to come and be very opinionated about this. Otherwise, there's too much infrastructure to think about and to set up. So you need these frameworks to really guide you. And if you go back just a few years, I think the consensus was that people in the Node ecosystem, they don't want frameworks. They want libraries that they can compose any way they want. And that kind of worked because JavaScript is more high level than the languages we used before, Java, for example. But it also works because everything was running on one machine. So there's very little complexity, and that's just not the case anymore. Now you have the static things that are deployed to CDN. You have dynamic components of the CDN. You have the serverless functions. There's just too much, and you need the libraries, the frameworks to tie it all together. So that has been cool to see.
Yeah. All right, I think we are slowly getting ready to wrap things up here. Do you have any things that you have excited about in 2022, Alex? Can be Prisma related, can be non-Prisma related. What are you looking forward to?
You've mentioned most of them, but I am also excited, besides seeing the direction Redwood goes, also Remix. It seems pretty exciting. There's also seeing a few more features get to general availability, like MongoDB support. I know a lot of folks who would like to use that feature and would like to support more users and hopefully, collaborate with them. And other than that, also the Prisma data platform. There's a feature that Søren, you mentioned on Twitter, which is the smart caching system, which seems pretty exciting. I don't know how it would work, but I would definitely be interested in seeing that feature come to life. Yeah.
Let's talk about the data platform just a little bit, because we talked about, or you talked about projections at a serverless conference, and we chose projections because it was a good example of what you can do when you start storing and processing all the database events. But really, there are many other things you can do. So maybe just to talk about for a second how that works.
Yeah, for sure.
When you have a relational database, then your mental model is very simple. For every single request, you need to read from the database. That's it. But if your read from the database is very expensive, for example, if it has a number of joins and aggregations, it can be really expensive to compute that read. So then you can do the simple thing, which is to try to cache the result and go down that route. That has its own set of complexities. But what companies do at scale is they pre-compute the result. So they create those views that they maintain at write time instead of calculating them at read time. And that's the idea you talked about with projections in the conference, Alex. And that's really the underlying implementation of that is called change data capture. The idea is for every write, every insert and update and delete to the database, you take that event out, you store it somewhere, and you have a secondary system that can keep a secondary state up to date based on that. And that could be a projection into Elasticsearch, for example, if you want to have a search index. It can also be a different table in the same database where you can now do a point lookup instead of doing a table scan. It's much cheaper. But you can also have that secondary system automatically invalidate a cache when the data that resulted in a cache entry has changed. You can use it to power what we call GraphQL subscriptions, or any kind of subscription really. You can send those events out to the browser. So what we're going to do in the data platform is to build a generic system to handle those database change events. And then next year, we will probably only build one thing, and it's probably going to be projections. We'll build that on top of this generic system.
Okay, I've changed it.
But then we'll go and build more things in the future. I think Siri started talking to me.
That event system, I'm also really looking forward to that, and it's kind of a prerequisite for the data projections, right? And is that something you think that will also already live in some, or will be exposed in one way or another in the open source tools in the Prisma ORM, or is it something where people won't get access to at first in the open source version, and it's just kind of there to power the like data projections?
I think the way to think about it is that we will create a hosted version that just works, has a really easy to understand serverless pricing, and then we'll make it really easy and natural to access from the ORM. So it will tie into the existing fully type-safe experience you have with the Prisma client.
Very nice. A lot of things to be excited for in 2022. We are not quite at the 2-hour mark. Are there any things that you, either of you, still want to mention, either in review of the past year, outlook to the next year, or really anything else that you think is relevant for our viewers?
Yes, actually, I am also excited about Planet Scale because it treated like a new mental model to think about databases, which I didn't know about, which is like the database branches, which is similar to Git, and it makes perfect sense. Usually sucks sometimes when I have to spin up a new database just to experiment with a certain schema and then have to destroy it. It's usually very messy for me. If you check my table plus, there are so many databases.
Me too.
Yeah.
Databases have been too complex and fragile, right? And you should work with databases the way you work with Notion pages. You should just create them all over the place. And I'm excited for all of the serverless database providers making that a thing.
Yeah. All right. I think that is it then for today. Am I right? Or any one of you still want to add anything?
No, I think that's it. Do we have, we don't have questions from anybody we should answer, right?
Not very recently, but it's we can scroll up. Maybe there were some along the way. I think most of them were about Redwood, and Anthony already during the stream wrote responses to them. And about Prisma, is there a way to randomize data when querying using Prisma? That's not baked in, I'm sure. We don't have this in the Prisma client API. Also, I'm not 100% sure what exactly is meant by randomizing data.
Maybe it's the order of data returned. Take the top 5 but by random order or something.
Could be that. I think there actually was a similar question that had been asked once already on the stream, and back then I told the person to go to GitHub discussions and ask the questions there. That's usually where you have higher chances of getting a proper response to your questions. So I'll do the same here again and refer to GitHub discussions. That's the place where we collect questions from the community and have team members go through the discussions to respond to them as well. I just dropped the link for that here in the chat. So it's just the discussions tab in the Prisma repo. And yeah, one request from Mayank to support join with aggregation. I think
this is what I'm talking about, right? This long tail of all of those features we need to support. And obviously you can drop down to raw SQL and do it through the Prisma client. That's really annoying. So it would be really nice if you could do it in a type-safe way in Prisma client. And I mean, hopefully we get there next year.
Yeah, it's coming. And also to you, the call to action, Mayank, if you want this feature implemented, then your best way to do so is to go on GitHub, either find the right issue and leave a thumbs up and a comment in there. That helps our product teams prioritize the issues. When there is more activity, it's more likely to get picked up. It's that simple. And if there is no feature that matches your request, then of course you're more than welcome to create the request yourself.
Yeah.
All right. And with that, I think we're all ready for the holidays. Thank you for joining us today, Søren. And yeah, see everybody next year in 2022. Bye-bye.
Alex and Niko, thank you.